Hi everyone and welcome to Fridays with Fenning. Well, what a week it's been in football. Last weekend the announcement was made that a new midweek football league was being set up. It was called the European Super League. Only invited teams could be part of it, those being the richest teams in Europe, and there was no promotion or relegation. And basically the top 6 wealthiest British clubs were invited and all agreed to join. And then something hit the fan. The Premier League said that they would exclude the clubs. UEFA said that they would ban them from the European tournaments. And football pundits got very worked up about it. And I don't think that I've heard the word greed mentioned quite so often in conversations in the media. And instead of this being something that the fans wanted, the motivation for this seemed to be purely financial. More money for the rich clubs. And then, over the week, all 6 English clubs pulled out and the new league is basically now in tatters. But greed, it was the word they used so freely by football pundits and by fans alike. And greed was seen as this ugly, selfish and self-centred thing. Greed was despised. Why? Because greed is ugly and despised when it's seen in others. Now, greed is one of the 7 deadly sins, along with envy, which I looked at last week, and pride and gluttony and lust and anger and sloth. But what is greed? I mean, I looked it up. It's an excessive desire to acquire or possess more than what one needs or deserves, especially with respect to material wealth. It's basically a sin of excess, to want and to have more. And partly what's wrong with that? I mean, surely it's good to want stuff to get what we can so that we don't need to rely on handouts from others. Well, there's a half-truth there. Yes, it's good to work hard and provide for ours and our family's needs. But greed goes a step further than that. Greed is constantly desiring more money, more stuff in order to provide security and protect ourselves, often at the expense of others. It's why the European Super League was so hated, the rich paying the rich and the poorer clubs losing out. It's why 1% of adults in the world own 40% of the planet's wealth, whereas 50% of the world's population owns only 1% of global wealth. Now, is that good? Is that the way that things should be? You see, greed, whether individually or globally, is all about the love of money and possessions and the power that comes with it. Greed is when the desire for more money and material wealth replaces or causes us to ignore other relationships and our own spiritual well-being. Greed is the assumption that it's all for my consumption. It's so easy to get enticed by greed. We see things we like, we want them because they're going to make us happy, and we get it, and then we want another fix, so we want more. And instead of us owning money, money starts to own us and drive us. And greed not only results in wealth too, it also puts people in debt when they overstretch, when they can't help buy that next purchase, even though they can't afford it. Greed, well, it messes up life and relationships, and it puts our focus on the wrong things. It puts our focus on stuff. So what's the antidote? Well, God knows that we're prone to greed, how easy to get caught in the trap of always seeking after more stuff, more money. So he gives us 2 ways to overcome it: generosity and gratitude. Solomon, in his wisdom writing, says this: some people are always greedy for more, but the godly love to give. One of the greatest actions that we can do is to be generous, to give. Paul, a writer in the New Testament, writes a letter to a young leader called Timothy, and he says this: teach those who are rich in this world not to be proud and not to trust in their money, which is so unreliable. Their trust should be in God, who richly gives us all we need for our enjoyment. Tell them to use their money to do good. They should be rich in good works and generous to those in need, always being ready to share with others. And by doing this, they will be storing up their treasure as a good foundation for the future, so they may experience true life. What he's saying is to stop greed from grabbing our heart and pulling us away from God. It's essential that we learn to be generous. Be generous in our care, in our love, and in our practical giving. You know, there's something so freeing, so liberating when we're prepared to give and not hoard, when we're willing to help others by sharing what we have and holding our money and possessions lightly. Now, I've been the recipient of some amazing generosity just recently. You know, without me knowing, a number of people gave some money to go towards me buying a new car. Now, my old car had died, and for the first time ever, I've been able to purchase a relatively new car. Honestly, it's incredible, and all because of the generosity of others. And I'm so grateful, and it pushes me to want to express that same kind of generosity to others. So if you question whether greed has a hold in your life, or you want to make sure that it doesn't take root, then the answer is be generous. Decide to give generously to a charity or a church or to a family member or friend who's struggling. You could sponsor a child with compassion or hands at work. Learn to let go rather than hold on. And if greed is seen as ugly, then generosity is seen as beautiful. You know, I remember hearing the sad news of George Michael's death on Christmas Day 2016. And following his death, news came out of his generous giving to many charities, including Childline, where he had given millions of pounds. And his generosity made the news because it had all been done in secret. And suddenly people's attitude towards him changed. Why? Because generosity is beautiful. We can beat greed by being generous, and we can beat greed by being thankful. I mean, just take stock of what you have and be grateful for how rich you are. You know, you might not think you are, but you are rich. When the Forge people travelled to Zambia and Guatemala to work alongside orphans and vulnerable people, they spend 2 weeks there. And coming back is hard because they've been part of a culture where people have very little and yet still find joy, where they struggle to find enough food to eat and yet they're still willing to share it. And coming back and seeing houses full of stuff and supermarkets chock full of every kind of food, honestly, it's hard to adjust. And they become very aware of how rich we are here. I mean, did you know that if you earn £20,000 a year, you're in the top 5% of the richest people in the world? And if your combined family income is 40,000, then you're in the top 1% of the richest people in the world. Amazing. The problem is we don't realise it because we compare ourselves with others similar to us. So we need to learn to be grateful. Every good gift and every perfect present comes from heaven. It comes down from God, says James, one of the Bible's authors. So live generous and grateful lives. Learn to be content with what we have. Learn to say enough rather than always looking to accumulate more. And stamp out greed by discovering the joy of living generously and living gratefully. So my challenge to you is this. How will you demonstrate generosity to others over this coming weekend? I tell you, discovering the beauty of giving rather than accumulating is so liberating. So give it a go. Hey, thanks for watching as always, and I do hope you have a really great weekend. Take care.